Welcome to the Ayn Rand Fan Club. I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig. William, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. Well, we've got a powerful show today talking about the rise of Nick Fuentes.
Right. We decided to jump into this topic. We see that Nick Fuentes is making the rounds on all the podcasts, and a lot of conservatives are upset about this because they think that people like Tucker Carlson are platforming Nick Fuentes and making him mainstream now. So we want to address this issue about Nick Fuentes and what he's all about and whether you should platform him and what people like Tucker Carlson are all about. So we're going to start with the interview where Tucker Carlson is interviewing Nick Fuentes. And then we're going to jump into Ayn Rand and what she thought about Israel and the conflict in the Middle East, because we think it's relevant to Nick Fuentes, since Nick Fuentes seems to be an admirer of some things that Ayn Rand has said, and he's publicly addressed that. But mainly, we're going to focus on Fuentes and the Jewish question and the Israel question, and then later on, we're going to talk about the recent Piers Morgan interview of Nick Fuentes, which was much more contentious. What Piers Morgan actually challenged Nick Fuentes and called him a racist and got him to admit a lot of things that he otherwise wouldn't have admitted. So that's the program for this episode. I think we're going to jump right into some of the Tucker Carlson material.
Yeah, and I should say just at the beginning, my last name is Schiff, and so I have Jewish ancestry. I grew up Jewish. I'm not religious. I still support Israel. And so, but it ends up, some of it's personal to me because basically with the rise of Fuentes, there's a lot of these people that are just like, if you have a Jewish last name and you're saying anything in support of Israel, they're going to say, oh, did you get your $7,000 check yet? Or, how much is Israel paying you? You're a shill or you're a, Zionist tribalist. And so, it just, and not only the specific danger that I see. I mean, going back to Rand for a second, Binswanger said Rand quoted Rand as saying, the only time I consider myself Jewish is when I hear anti-Semitism, and she apparently resigned from a New York radio station in the '60s because they had someone calling for the killing of Jews on there. And, from what I understand, Isabel Patterson, her close friend, that they actually broke off relations. This has been reported in several biographies. But Isabel Patterson, after going to someone's house, she said, I don't like Jewish intellectuals. And Rand basically said, well, then, you don't like me. And they kind of stopped talking after that. Now, whether or not, how reliable that is, I
I
just feel the
looked,
same way. Go ahead.
I looked that one up because I vaguely recalled that story, but I couldn't remember where it's from. So I looked it up, and it is mentioned in a book I have, The Goddess of the Market by Jennifer Burns. And she sources that from an Ayn Rand biographical interview, which I assume exists in the Ayn Rand archives, and because she visited the archives.
Right.
So it is sourced from an interview with Ayn Rand. So, and I think the Brandons did those interviews. So I get some of that story. I don't know if the breakup with Patterson was kind of like completely based on that interchange or interaction, but there were other instances of disagreement, especially around religion, and because Patterson was more sympathetic to the Catholic doctrine and Rand was more sympathetic to the Jewish intellectuals. So
Yeah.
they had a strong disagreement on religion, and they also disagreed on other aspects of philosophy. So, and there was personality differences. I think Ayn Rand didn't like how Patterson was so like bold and like critical of people.
I mean, Rand is known for being bold, but My point is that, even though you can be an atheist and not religious at all, yeah, when people start talking about hating Jews, I mean, you can try saying, "Oh, I'm not religious anymore." They don't care. The people that hate Jews don't care about that. And this is an example. This is where before Tucker's interview with Nick Fuentes, it was actually after Charlie Kirk's death. Tucker was speaking at his funeral, and he took the opportunity to share this anecdote.
But whatever happens next in America, I hope it's in this direction, because God is here and you can feel it. And Charlie would have loved this, not just because he loved large groups of people, but because ultimately he was a Christian evangelist. And it actually reminds me of my favorite story ever. So it's about 2,000 years ago in Jerusalem, and Jesus shows up and he starts talking about the people in power, and he starts doing the worst thing that you can do, which is telling the truth about people, and they hate it, and they just go bonkers. They hate it, and they become obsessed with making him stop. This guy's got to stop talking. We've got to shut this guy up. And I can just sort of picture the scene in a lamplit room with a bunch of guys sitting around eating hummus, thinking about, what do we do about this guy telling the truth about us? We must make him stop talking. And there's always one guy with the bright idea, and I can just hear him say, I've got an idea, why don't we just kill him? That'll shut him up. That'll fix the problem.
So, hummus eaters, he was saying, not the Romans. I mean, it's just, there are certain things that happen when someone doesn't like Jews. I mean, they start off with the Jews killed Jesus, or, Jews gave us communism, which there may actually be some, at least something to that. But no, I don't think they actually gave us communism, but there were intellectuals that supported it over the years. But honestly, I just heard that. I'm just like, man, Tucker just does not like Jews.
Well, that is from the Bible, I mean, the Jewish elders convinced the Romans to arrest him.
I understand that. I'm just saying there's like, the history of anti-Semitism. It's like one thing they would do were these passion plays where they would, in the Middle Ages, where they'd show, the Jews killing Jesus, and then they'd go and like basically raid the Jewish community and like kill a bunch of people.
Yeah, I mean, if you believe the Bible, then that's what happened. But what I find interesting about the clip is that this is Tucker's favorite story ever. The part about
plotting his death,
Jesus getting in trouble with the Jewish council, and then them plotting to murder him. What's that about? I mean, your favorite story about Jesus should be something about his ministry. The guy talked to people and gathered a huge following with his parables and his lectures, and he went around healing people and doing these miracles. I mean, and your favorite story is like when he got in trouble, in the end, and then got murdered. So I just find that odd, that this is his favorite story ever. And it shows his hyperbolic nature. It shows Tucker's hyperbolic nature. He's always overgeneralizing, and you can't really trust any of his evaluations because he just blows it out of proportion all the time.
Yeah, I just see it as something happened to him. It was a series of steps. When he went to Russia and was talking about like how amazing their shopping carts were, and I mean, even the recent interview with Cutter that he did, and we'll get to that here in a minute. But just getting to the Tucker interviewing Fuentes, this was controversial at the time, and Tucker got a lot of blowback for it. But in this first clip, he talks about why he didn't get a job at the Leadership Institute.
2-week training. I go there, and on the first day of the whole thing, they go around the room of all the prospective applicants. It's like a big tryout, basically, for 2 weeks. and they wanted to get everybody to break the ice and know each other. So we did introductions. They said, say your name, how old you are, and why you're a conservative. And at this time, people are not where, let's say, we are right now. They're not America first. They're not anything like, they're not talking about great replacement. That's not on the radar for them. So you go around the room and you hear stuff about small government, free markets, personal responsibility, that sort of thing. And they get to me and I said, well, I'm a conservative because we're losing our civilization because of mass immigration. America doesn't resemble America anymore. France is no longer France. I said, and if we don't conserve the demographics, forget about the rest. That's what we need to conserve. And I said that. And I was told later on that at that moment, I was immediately disqualified by the people that were running the job training.
Yeah. So one important question that people have been discussing is like, who is Nick Fuentes? Like, what is he all about? And I picked this clip here because I think it's really important. I think it gets to something that's essential about Nick Fuentes, and that's why he's a conservative. This was
I don't know that he is a conservative. That he's saying when he was at that organization. But I mean, he got canceled, essentially, is what he's saying.
Yeah. But in this clip, he's talking about who he is and, what drives him, what motivates him. And he was talking to a conservative group. It was the Leadership Institute. He was applying for a field representative job there. And he talks about the one side of the conservatives who are about free markets and individual rights and responsibilities. But he brushes that aside and says, no. What I'm trying to conserve is the demographics. And so what he's talking about is racial makeup, cultural makeup. And he's equating conservatism with preserving whiteness or, white heritage, European heritage. And he wants to keep America demographically white or European. So that's the most important thing to him. And so my argument here is going to be that the way to attack Nick Fuentes is to say he's not really America first. He's a race first. He's white first. He's not America first, because America is not about that. America is about an ideology, political ideology involving individual rights, which comes from our founding fathers.
Well, I think this is really relevant for a later clip where he's admonishing a kid for doing like the Roman salute, saying that they have to kind of hide who they are until they take power. And I think what happened to him here at the Leadership Institute is part of where he got that idea from. But
I was also going to mention something about the history of this idea, and the reason why why Nick Fuentes is resonating with conservatives is because he's touching on something that they themselves believe in. They believe that America is culturally Christian, was founded on Christianity. And this goes back to people like Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh, in his book, The Way Things Ought to Be, has a chapter 25, called Religion and America, They Do Go Together.
But that's different than race.
It's different from race. But so what you're saying in that clip you mentioned is that they need to hide their racism, but the way they're relating to conservatives is by saying we want Christianity to be in our government. We want a Christian government, and that resonates with religious conservatives. So on one hand, he's really appealing to a broad base of conservatives, but on the other hand, he's got this racism to deal with, and he's got to kind of undermine that or tone that down.
That's true. And maybe Tucker's helping him to some extent. In this next clip along those lines, Tucker tries to help coach him, it seems, because he's saying, is it turning, other people calling you a racist that's turned you into a racist?
when you get attacked, when people call you names, like they always called me racist, and I would always think to myself, I'm actually not. I would tell you if I was racist. I'm a little sexist, but I'm not racist. And I never understood why they did that. And then I thought maybe the point is to make me racist. Where you just get to a point where you're like, well, if you're going to slander me, then I'll just become the thing you're calling me. I do think that's a feature of human nature, don't you? Mm-hmm. And if you stare too intently at the accusers, at the, whatever Ben Shapiro's or Mark Levin's or Ted Cruz or whoever it is calling you names, it like distorts you and you actually change and become what they say you are. Have you thought that ever? Do you worry that happened to you?
No, I don't think it ever did, because I know who I am. I had a very firm grounding of what I'm about, which is that I was deeply Catholic, and I still am, deeply patriotic and pro-American. And I don't consider myself temperamentally to be an angry or a hateful person. So I never, in other words, lost my center. They say this thing about you look into the abyss and the abyss stares back into you. That never really happened to me.
So that's also an interesting clip because it gets into his philosophy. But it's also interesting because I think it's the way that Tucker Carlson is indirectly asking Nick if he thinks or considers himself to be a racist. He does it in a subtle way by saying, because people are calling you a racist and you look at them and you think about it so for a long time, does that turn you into a racist, where you kind of just accept that you're a racist because people are calling you one? You look into the abyss and you become the abyss, that sort of thing.
But then Tucker kind of admitted that that's turned him into a racist. I don't think the left can make us racist, but they may have decided already we're racist no matter what we do, just for being white or something. But I think, when he's sitting there saying to Nick, is that how you see human nature too? I mean, that's the softball part.
Yeah, it's the indirect kind of cushy interview style where Tucker doesn't want to directly confront Nick and challenge him with like quotes from his past, kind of like how Piers Morgan did.
Right. We'll get to that.
Yeah. So, but also you mentioned that, this is how Tucker Carlson sees the world. And it reminds me of Ayn Rand's view of social metaphysics, where you kind of base your own worldview on how other people see you. I might be getting that slightly off, but it's based on you accepting what other people are saying, and that becomes your view. And that seems to be what Tucker's saying here, is that he struggles with this problem where people are calling him all these names. And then so it kind of makes him just want to be that, just say, look, I admit I'm that. And to some extent, I think Nick Fuentes does that a little bit, to where Piers Morgan was calling him a racist. And he says, okay, well, I'm a racist, and he just sort of accepts the label. He doesn't challenge being called that, because people calling him that, and he sees a way to get around it by saying, well, everyone's a little bit racist. And so if everyone's a racist, then of course Nick Fuentes is a racist as well. So he kind of gets around it by just, saying, well, everyone's this. That's the way everybody is.
Yeah, there's a duplicity in a lot of what he says or what Candace says, and they're just, sometimes it's contradictory. And we'll get into that later. I want to talk a little bit about, this is the clip that I found the most crucial. And it's where Tucker basically says he hates Christian Zionists basically more than anyone.
All people I know personally who I've seen be seized by this brain virus, and they're not Jewish. Most of them are self-described Christians, and then the Christian Zionists who are, well, Christian Zionists. What is that?
Right.
And I could just say for myself, I dislike them more than anybody, because what? Because it's Christian heresy, and I'm offended by that as a Christian.
This to me is the real battle. In a lot of cases, Protestantism was much friendlier to Judaism than Catholicism. And the rise of Protestantism I think plays a role in how Jews have survived this long. And I happen to think that, Tucker and probably Nick sees that as well. And what they're saying is, turn your hate to Christians that like Jews or that like Israel. I mean, Zionists, it's supposed to be for Israel, but I mean, he's saying he doesn't like Christians that are for Jews. And
Well, yeah, it's pretty clear that he has some strong dislike for any Christian who is, favors Israel or Jewish state, so or Jewish nation, which I think is a big problem because if they want a Christian nation, why can't Jews have their own nation? It seems like a contradiction.
I'm not, it's mainly just about if Israel is your only problem in the world because you think they're controlling our government or because, they start all the wars. I mean, if you, it's one thing to think that Palestinians deserve a homeland, but if you don't care about like the Kurds getting a homeland because they're not violent enough, it's like, why do you, is it just because you react to the violence of the Palestinians or that you don't like Jews? And, maybe it's some of each, but I'm open to ideas. I don't like to necessarily just say someone's anti-Semitic because they're anti-Israel, but I do know that there are a lot of people that hide their anti-Semitism behind just being anti-Israel. And I mean, it's like what Tucker was saying about the hummus eaters. It's like that had nothing to do with the state of Israel.
That might be him just being descriptive, colorful in his thinking, because I guess hummus is a treat, a food that Jews might eat. I mean, I love hummus. I mean, so a lot of people, a lot of different.
Am I allowed to like hummus then?
Yeah, but it's more associated, I guess, with the Middle Eastern diet.
Anyway, he was alluding. He was trying to say Jews without saying Jews.
Yeah. One thing Tucker says in there is he calls it a Christian heresy to be a Christian Zionist. So I think he's basing his hostility in his religious views. So he's really basing it on this battle between Jews and Christians. And he doesn't think that if you're a true Christian, you should be for any Jewish nation.
He's saying if you're not a real Christian if you like Jews.
Because you want Christianity to dominate and take over the world. Christianity should be the world religion. Any other religion is a heresy. And that therefore, to bring about the return of Christ or whatever, or to bring about a one world nation under Christianity, you can't have a Jewish nation. You can't support that. I don't know if this is a time.
Agree with that. And what he's trying to say is if you take that position, he won't consider you a real Christian. It's like, he's going to give him the David Kelly treatment, kicking him out of the group. But to me,
if we can briefly discuss nation building, because I think this is the fundamental problem with their attitude, is that first of all, they play on this idea of there being a tribalistic nation centered around Judaism, which is something that objectivists would probably sympathize with, since we don't think that there should be theocracies or any sort of nation based on a religion. But I tend to disagree. I think we shouldn't get involved in other nations' businesses, why they form a group or why they form a nation. As long as they're not hostile to America, that should be our number one interest, is are they hostile to us? But
they believe that they are hostile, that the Jews have bad intentions for America, getting them into wars. And, and I mean, there have been Jewish neocons that were pro-war. That doesn't mean it's like a Jewish policy. It's these specific individual Jewish intellectuals. And, but another thing that Nick does is he talks about he's offended by the Judeo-Christian, that Judeo-Christian has no meaning. There's no Judeo-Christian value, that it should be torn apart. And unfortunately, people like Yaron Brook of the Ayn Rand Institute actually has the same basic view, because he's so hostile to Christians. He doesn't want to see the Jews and the Christians get together either.
Well, so this depends on your meaning of Judeo-Christian, because on one hand, they're two different religions, and they are contradictory. Jews don't believe that Jesus was the Savior, or was, the Son of God, the Messiah, and Christians do. So, I mean, these are fundamental differences. So if you believe that Judeo-Christian refers to the fundamental values of each religion, then they can't really go together. But if you believe that it's something other than that, and it's something that's based on like secondary values, then I think you can have a coalition based on these secondary values between Jews and Christians, because they do share some of the same stories. Especially, Christians believe in the Old Testament stories. So you can go, it might go one way. I don't know if Jews share any Christian values, but I assume they share at least this sort of individualism that Christians have in Jesus.
I think individualism comes more from the Protestant side anyway.
I think that there is that element in the Gospels. There's definitely Jesus standing out from the crowd, and creating the new belief in forgiveness, and he's teaching. He's coming down from heaven as the Son of God, teaching people to forgive, and he's the symbol of God's forgiveness and atonement. So I don't know. It's hard to say that Jews might refer to that or believe that.
I'm just saying there's a thing commonly known in society called like the Judeo-Christian ethic, Judeo-Christian values, and people that think that should be torn apart, it's either Jews that don't like Christians or Christians that don't like Jews.
But what is it? I mean, you tell me. What in your mind, what are the Judeo-Christian values?
I consider it Western values. I mean, there was like this Jewish emancipation that happened, in the late 18th century in Europe, and, around the time, and Washington himself, welcomed Jewish Americans. At least one helped finance the revolution. And so, Jews came over here in big numbers in the 19th and 20th century as they were starting to get attacked in Russia. And so, I just see it as like these common values of working hard and doing right, and, just what we accept as common sense. And I don't know exactly, the roots of who started calling it Judeo-Christian, but it's there, it's out there. And the people saying, oh, tear it apart. No, I don't want to tear it apart. I actually see Christians as like kind of Jewish bodyguards, and from
interesting that you say that, because historically, what I see happening is especially Protestants started tolerating Jews and allowing them to be more free in society, to the point where you get America and everybody's equal under the eyes of the law, including Jews. And so, especially in America and many parts of the West now, Jews are treated just as equally as Christians and under the law. And you don't see that in other parts of the world, especially in Arab nations where they just aren't tolerated. So I attribute it mostly to Christian tolerance, which comes from Jesus, who, he tolerated.
Protestants weren't around for the first 1,500 years.
Yeah. But Jesus, taught a lot of different things, and, Catholics and Protestants have little disagreements here and there about it. So I think Catholics are less tolerant, but Protestants are very tolerant. And that's why you have all these different Christian sects who get together and, live in harmony, basically, without these religious.
You're trying to go out there and say, oh, there shouldn't be this Judeo-Christian thing. Those should be split apart. That's people, like I said, it's Jews that hate Christians or Christians that hate Jews. And I think there's nothing wrong with that alliance. I'm a coalition builder, and it's been a good coalition over the last 500 years. And I think people trying to tear it apart are the bad guys. But in this last clip with Tucker with Fuentes, Fuentes actually references Ayn Rand.
I personally find women very frustrating when they are not expressing, and I just view that as
the beauty of it.
I see the way I look at it is like when you look at your favorite TV shows,
right?
The Sopranos, Breaking Bad. It's like the wife is the villain because it's like the main character, if the wife could just get out of the way, would be running the show. And that's kind of how I feel like Ayn Rand. I agree with her about this. She said that the wife's role is like hero worship. The guy is the hero. The guy is supposed to be the entrepreneur, the conqueror, whatever. And the woman is really supposed to support the man's goals and be in his world. And
that's the last thing successful men need is more power worship, more hero worship, more, you're so great. When you get that at work, you don't want that at home. You become an unbearable asshole. And then you fall prey to what destroys every successful man, which is hubris. Like you mistake yourself for God. You need someone who's not interested in what you do at all, only interested in you. And that's how you become balanced and wise.
So that's an interesting clip there because it shows that Ayn Rand influences Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes treats her ideas seriously and actually says he agrees with something that she said.
At least that women should be subservient. I don't know that Rand said that, but that's what he took.
I'm not sure he said subservient in that clip, but he may have said it elsewhere because I know he has more of a religious Christian view of the wife's role in a marriage. But he does generally describe Rand's view correctly there, although Rand wasn't specifically talking about a wife. She was talking about what femininity is and how a woman, or let me read the quote. I have the quote here. She says, quote, "For a woman qua woman, the essence of femininity is hero worship, the desire to look up to man. To look up does not mean dependence, obedience, or anything implying inferiority. It means an intense kind of admiration." She didn't have the religious view of what a wife should be. She was talking about an abstract emotion or feeling a woman should have for her man, the man she admires.
I don't know that most closed objectivists would explicitly say they agree with that formulation.
Maybe not. I'm not a woman, so I think I know what masculinity is, but I'm not sure if I got femininity correct. And I'm 50 years old, so I do think femininity in essence has something more to do with what a woman as a woman means, maybe like childbearing or something like that.
Yeah.
But it also has to do with how you perceive the opposite sex, I think. But I'm not sure that Ayn Rand got it perfectly right.
It's funny because I heard Joe Rogan imply at one point that Ayn Rand fans are incels, and I think that applies much more to Fuentes, as we'll see in this Piers Morgan interview as well.
I do think his perspective here is heavily inspired by his virginity or his alleged virginity. He's 29 years old and he says that he's never had sex. So I think some of
Does it count with a guy? I heard he hooked up with a guy.
I'm not going to speculate on his sexuality, but he says he's attracted to women. And I find it hard to believe that he's still a virgin at 29 and he's seriously attracted to women. Because he's obviously a popular guy. He could have, I'm sure there's tons of women out there who would have sex with him. There's got to be one that doesn't piss him off to the extent where he just can't deal with it.
He's
So
just dedicated to the cause.
there's something going on, which I don't think we've learned the full extent of.
We probably will. So I know you.
One other thing, real quick. So I think the most important takeaway from that clip is that Nick Fuentes, who's considered to be on the far right, is still influenced by Ayn Rand, but he's also influenced by religion and American ideals and values. And so what we're dealing with are American intellectual mutts. You know, we're dealing with people who, even though they say they're Christians and they want a Christian government, they're still partly influenced by Ayn Rand. And she was an atheist, a woman, and Nick Fuentes takes some of her ideas. So clearly he doesn't hate all ideas coming from women or all ideas coming from atheists. He doesn't just disregard them outright. He listens to them. And that's
But I mean, it's just
take-
this one idea that women should worship their man. I mean, I don't know how many other things he probably dismisses her as a Jew.
Well, in some of the other things he talks about, for example, he does seem to be a bit of an individualist. So he will talk about, not being so much of a tribalist, but you still need to be a little bit of an individualist. So I think he takes some of that to heart, although he's still a mutt. So he's like putting all these ideas together and he's trying to justify his Christian government through some sort of weird individualism. It's difficult to understand, and he's all over the place. He's not very principled in that regard, but he's 29 years old. I didn't have it all together when I was 29 years old. So I think we're dealing with a very smart person who's very popular and charismatic, but he still hasn't hashed out his full philosophy.
But he knows he hates Jews. And frankly, women and blacks, I could argue as well. But I do want to switch gears before we get into the other interview with Piers Morgan, because speaking of Ayn Rand, when she was on Donahue, she defended Israel.
If you mean whose side should one be on, Israel or the Arabs, I would certainly say Israel because it's the advanced, technological, civilized country amidst a group of almost totally primitive savages who have not changed for years and who are racist and who resent Israel because it's bringing industry and intelligence and modern technology into their stagnation.
So she could probably have gotten some grief for, calling them mostly savages. I mean, she properly calls them racist. At least she seems to be implying their anti-Jewish sentiment makes them racist.
Well, I do think she deserves a little criticism for this sort of rhetoric because I don't think it's logical. It's not a logical argument to say you're for Israel because of they're civilized versus primitive savages. Even if Arabs were primitive savages, that doesn't mean that they're the enemy. They have to be the fact that they're anti-Israel or anti-America. That might be the better case. So I think you don't need to resort to this ad hominem rhetoric. I think what you can say is that Israel is more aligned with Western values or more aligned with American values than Arabs. So that's why you should support Israel instead of the Arabs.
I mean, that's one approach, but I mean, it's mainly that they're in this fight where, the Arabs want to destroy Israel and have since its founding. And so I just don't know why it would matter whether I think it's a decent argument that they are technologically advanced. And frankly, you may disagree with it, but it's consistent with her view towards the treatment of the American Indians that she talked about at West Point. she got a lot of grief about. She's been for the more civilized, advanced group to go on. And there is something also implicit with Israel being more civilized. They weren't trying to destroy all the Arab countries.
Yeah, well, I think that's a flaw in her argument. Again, just because a nation is more advanced or more civilized than another doesn't mean that they're your friend. Germany in World War II was highly advanced in a civilization that had been was a very famously advanced in art and philosophy, but they were the enemy because they were morally horrible.
Right.
So I think it's the moral question is what's important. So in the case of Israel versus Arabs, you can make a case that Israel is more morally aligned with the West, morally aligned with America than Arabs. Because you just look at the way Israel has a more open society, how they treat people versus Arabs. Arabs don't even treat their women the way the Western nations do. So you can look at these sorts of moral questions, and I think that's how to evaluate which side is better, which side is your ally. And unfortunately, I think Rand's rhetoric has problems, and she doesn't go to that. She doesn't go there. She stays with the civilization versus savages argument, and I don't think that works.
It's a TV show. She gets like a 30-second answer, but from Ayn Rand Answers, you pulled this out. This was after the Yom Kippur War in 1973. Give all possible help to Israel. When you have civilized men fighting savages, you support the civilized men, no matter what. Israel is a mixed economy inclined towards socialism. This is the first time I've contributed to a public cause, helping Israel in an emergency. That was 1973.
So again, she uses the civilized world versus the primitive world argument. But also in this one, she ends by saying this is the first time she's contributed to a public cause defending Israel, which I think is interesting because is she saying she hadn't donated to American causes before that? So it kind of, unfortunately, it goes to Nick Fuentes' point that Jews are Israel first. And I think that's a problem.
I mean, she was already almost 70 at that time. I don't know if it's first, if she's waiting until she's in her late 60s, but I think, think people were reacting to what was happening in Israel at the time. I mean, in the Yom Kippur War, that's their highest holy day, and that's the day the Arabs chose to attack. It looked like Israel might go out then.
Yeah, I'm sure I wasn't there at the time, but I'm sure it was a dangerous situation, and I fully support her donating to Israel. That's her prerogative, and I probably would have donated to Israel myself if I were in that situation. But I also donate to American causes. I wouldn't say it was the first time I ever donated to a public cause. I'd say, look, I've donated time and money to all sorts of causes, most of them being in America. So I donate to all sorts of American causes. But in this case, I think it's in my interest, in America's interest, to also donate to Israel's cause. And because I want them to survive. They're a friend, they're an ally to the West. So I don't want to see them be destroyed.
She could have used you as a press agent.
Yeah.
Now to this other Rand quote or clip, she does, to your point, agree that Israel engages in tribalism.
Does Israel engage in tribalism? Is Israel engaged in tribalism?
Yes, to a large extent, simply because it is a socialist country, and it is a country based on exclusive religion, which is a state religion. That's another sign of tribalism. In form, it is sort of a mixed economy, predominantly socialistic or social democrat, which that means Marxist. It isn't quite tribalism, but the idea of a particular group's or a race's special culture, yes, of course, that's tribalism.
Yeah, I thought this was an important clip to show Ayn Rand's, a fuller view of Ayn Rand's thinking on Israel, where here she's acknowledging that Israel is a tribalistic nation based on a religion. And this reminds me of the type of question that Nick Fuentes' Groyper army might ask, conservatives when they go to these conservative talks by Ben Shapiro, and when Charlie Kirk was around, they went to his talks, and they would give these or ask these questions that were kind of biting and trying to show the contradiction in their positions. And so here Ayn Rand just handles it perfectly. She takes this tough question because she supports Israel, but then she also is admitting, yeah, they're a tribalistic nation. But her support isn't based on their tribalism. It's based on, I think it's really, she based it on, the Western values they shared.
Yeah, I mean, tribalism isn't necessarily disqualifying when those guys at ARI say they're no more tribal than anyone else, or the idea that if you want to look at how tribal the Arabs are compared, but tribal, there are actually 12 tribes of Israel that people try to trace back to. So it's more of a feature that, yes, there were actual groups that considered themselves tribes.
Yeah, and I wish she had said something about nation building and why you have these sorts of nations based on a religion, and the fact that that's okay. I mean, we can still be friends with a theocracy or a nation based on a religion, because this religion is one thing that binds people together. It's a philosophy. It's a system of belief. It's a religious one or a theocratic one, not a secular belief system like in America, but it's still a belief system that people can gather around and form a group around. And that's how you build a nation, on these shared values. And so it's less advanced than, let's say, a non-religious, more rational, reasonable system, but it's still a system of belief. And I think you can get along with people who have a religious-based nation, as long as they're not hostile to you and they're very tolerant of other religions.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I am generally more tolerant towards Christians than most Ayn Rand fans. And I think, yeah, that standard should apply to everyone. So then since we started planning this show, Fuentes went on with Piers Morgan. And Piers, to his credit, I will say he's probably more in it for the ratings than something moral, but Piers rattled Fuentes when he quoted his father talking about how he wouldn't take them to Applebee's or Red Lobster because he considered them black fare.
An anecdote that you revealed on your podcast. It's you that's put it in the public domain.
I know.
I'm simply asking you whether my assessment of that, which is that your father didn't want to take you to certain restaurants because of what you refer to as, they were commonly known as black fare, whether that attitude to African Americans in that instance permeated to you. It's a reasonable question.
Yeah, no, like I said, I think everybody knows what that is, but I'll address it. I'll engage with it, and I'll defend my father from the charge of racism.
Sure.
No, my parents are not racist, and they've never been racist. I'll tell you about my parents. They used to have a school in Chicago in the South Loop where they instructed people on how to shoot firearms. It was a security school, and most of the clients were black. And I believe actually one of their clients was Larry Hoover's son at one point, sort of a funny story. And so most of their clients would come in from the South side of Chicago. My grandmother, she grew up in the projects in the city. And so my family being in Chicago, being ethnics, being Italian, Irish, Mexican in the West Side on Taylor Street, all over the city. My family for many generations have lived near and around black people. And look, my views about black people and their views about black people are shaped with experiences with black people.
It's so funny when he's accused of racism, he starts being like, "Oh, my parents knew people who were black," and he's like not wanting them to have the racist charge, and it's just like, I thought you were owning it and proud of it a few minutes ago.
Does show a sort of hypocrisy or contradiction on Nick Fuentes' part, because he does say during the interview that he accepts the label of racism and everybody is a little racist. And then eventually he'll accept that even his father's probably a little racist. But we didn't show the actual clip where he gets all messed up regarding that, because he's at one point he says, "Leave my father out of it."
That's two clips.
Okay, that's coming up. That's coming up later. Okay, so so he talks about Piers Morgan brings up this anecdote that Nick Fuentes actually brought up on his podcast. So Nick Fuentes has himself to blame for this, because he's the one who talked about his father in this way. But I think he didn't realize that there was this potential for people using it against him. And he doesn't like the idea that, people are attacking his father. And so I think Piers Morgan managed to hit or find Nick Fuentes' weak spot. He has a weak spot regarding his family, and he has trouble dealing with that. But also regarding this black fair, he could have just said that his father didn't like food that was, black people food. He could have said something like that, like fried chicken, or I don't know what he meant. Like what is at Applebee's that is black fare? He could have gone into that.
I think they're talking about the other guests.
Oh, people who go there? Okay. Well, I don't know. I didn't get that, because fare usually refers to the food.
It just means like appealing to a black customer base is the way I interpret it.
The food appeals to black people.
Right.
Okay,
Not
so he could have,
he
could have just said he doesn't like that type of food. But I don't know, Applebee's, that's a weird connection, because Applebee's has all kinds of food. They have hamburgers and all kinds of stuff that white people eat, that what normally is associated with American fare.
I guess he just thought it was normal for everyone's dad to sound like that. And then Piers was like, do you ever consider maybe your dad made you racist? He's like, no, I couldn't have. And they love.
That's the point to be making here, is that that's how Piers Morgan got under Nick's skin, I think, a little bit, because he's making this association to his father and saying, look, your father was racist, and so now you're a racist. It's more of a nature versus nurture argument, and he's saying the nurturing you received from your father turned you into what you are today.
It's telling him he's not a self-made man. He's like just a sad product of his father's bigotry or something. But in this next clip, Piers actually pulls up a Fuentes clip of him talking about Jews, blacks, and women.
I want to come to something else you said. This is where you talk about Jews, women, and blacks. Let's just take a listen.
They're always coming up with, no, it's not the Jews. No, it's not women. No, it's not blacks. It's actually really complicated. No, it fucking isn't at all. Jews are running society. Women need to shut the fuck up. Blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part. And we would live in paradise. It's that simple.
Okay. Would you like to clarify what you meant there?
That's all true. That's 100% true. Everything I said in that clip is true.
Including that blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part.
Yeah. Yes.
But all of them?
No, for the most part.
What does the most part mean? What percentage of American blacks would you like to see in prison?
Whatever the percentages of the murderers. I think it's 1 in 20 black men will commit a murder in their lifetime. So maybe let's say that, 5%.
This is an example of his duplicity. I mean, he's saying for the most part, to me implies more than 50%. But yet when he's pushed on, he's like, oh, just 5%. And
it's an example of him like just hastily generalizing and not being specific in particular arguments. So when Yaron Brook does this a lot too. He'll overgeneralize and say all of this or all of that, everyone this, everyone that. And then when Nick Fuentes does it and gets called on it by Piers Morgan, he'll backtrack and reduce, it down to 5% of the population. So we find out that he doesn't want to imprison all blacks. All blacks aren't the problem. It's just this 5%. And so
when he says for the most part, he means more than 5%. He doesn't want a bunch of black people coming after him to actually say he wants the majority of black people put in prison.
He wants to have his cake and eat it too. He wants to be able to appeal out of one side of his mouth. He wants to appeal to the groypers who want to just do something with all blacks, like get rid of them from running our society or being a big part of our society. And then on the other hand, on the other side of his mouth, he wants to appeal to people like Piers Morgan, say, look, I don't really mean all blacks. I just mean this 5% of criminals or murderers.
And to Piers' credit, he corrects the statistics that it's only about 1 out of 100, according to his statistics.
Well, we can battle over statistics, but the point is, it's just, he's reducing it down from the generalized blacks to just 5% in particular. And then he'll probably do the same with women and with Jews, right? So out of one side of his mouth, he doesn't want Jews around, and on the other side of his mouth, one of his best friends is a Jew. So he'll say both things, try to appeal to both types of conservatives. And he'll do the same thing with women. Obviously, he's going to like some women. Not all women should shut up, because he likes Ayn Rand, some of what Ayn Rand has said. So some women should be listened to.
Well, to your point, I mean that, about the racism and whether everyone is racist, that's where Piers goes next. And and in this case, Nick takes the other side, like you're talking about, because he tries saying, yeah, I'm racist, but everyone's racist.
You've also said you don't want to live near black people. Let's take a listen to this clip.
I'm a new generation of white person. I'm not living around blacks. Sorry. I want white kids, and I don't want my white kids bringing home black people to marry. It's racial for me. And call me racist. Oh, very Christian of you. I don't give a fuck.
I mean, it couldn't be clearer, really, unless you want to say that's another of your jokes. But you're basically saying, yeah, I'm a racist, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
You're fine with saying you're a racist?
Totally. I think everybody's racist. I think everybody, if we're being honest, is racist. I think everybody, the only people that aren't racist or pretend not to be are white people, to their detriment. Everybody else is racist.
But earlier in the interview, you got aggrieved at the idea that your father was a racist. You wanted to make emphatically sure.
My father's...
He's not.
Because my father doesn't share my same views on that.
So he's the exception to everyone's a racist.
Well, everybody's a little bit racist. You're right. So maybe everybody. The difference is you're attacking my father. He can get fired from his job.
I'm not attacking your father.
You are.
No, I'm not. I don't know your father. And to be clear, I have no knowledge about him at all.
Well, then let's leave him out of it. Let's leave him out of it if you don't know him.
Hang on.
Yeah. So that's where Piers Morgan really gets under Nick's skin. And Nick comes back and says, let's leave my father out of this. I don't want to deal with your accusations.
I don't know why he exposed his own weakness now. Now people are going to be trying to get his dad fired.
When you get emotional, you do the stuff like that. Everyone's susceptible to getting emotional. When someone figures out how to get under your skin, you just can't help it. The emotion, your embarrassment, or, disgust, comes up, and then you say things that you would rather not say, or we would rather you hadn't said.
That was
So
a great
think
line. So everyone's racist but your father.
no, but notice what else he said. He said only white people pretend to not be racist, which is ridiculous. So like black people can't pretend not to be racist. There's
Yeah.
plenty of black people out there who aren't racist, and believe in treating people equally. And there's plenty of Asians, and there's all kinds of different races who aren't people who aren't racist. So this is just him getting emotional and saying stupid stuff that he probably would rather take back, but he can't, because he's one of those types of people who doesn't apologize or won't admit to regretting things unless he absolutely has to do it. So what you're seeing here is initially Nick is pretty calm, right? He's just saying, yeah, I'm a racist. You're calling me a racist. I accept that label. I think one reason why he does this and why he's so bombastic and controversial on his own podcast is because he thinks of himself as an entertainer. And he said that before. He said that, on his podcast, he's a different persona. He's the entertainer on his podcast. But when he goes on to interviews like Piers Morgan, he's trying to have a serious conversation with people. And he's kind of shedding that entertainer hat and trying to become this
great, convenient way to say whatever the hell you want and not be held responsible for it.
Yeah, but to some degree, you can see that. He is telling jokes on his own podcast, and he can get away with saying, look, I'm an entertainer. You can't take me as seriously on my podcast as you take me in these interviews. But even in the interviews, he'll take on the troll mentality sometimes and just say things that aren't serious. So I think he struggles with being serious and having a serious intellectual conversation.
I see it as a tactic for him to be able to get out of anything.
Well, it could be a tactic as well, but I don't know if he's that smart. He's smart, but I don't know. You saw him get emotional there when Piers brought up his father. So if he were a very calm, collected, serious intellectual, I don't think something like that would get under his skin. So he's smart
for a kid. He's still a little green.
Well, he's 29 years old. He's not exactly a kid. But
he's a young. He admonishes a 15-year-old for not being a kid later. But he is
a young man, and we should start treating him like a young man who should have his ideas together, at least mostly together at this point.
He doesn't care about that. He's trying to build this Groyper movement, and they don't care about consistency. But I just want to go back to this Fuentes thing when he's like saying how, Schindler's List, and we've had all this stuff forced on us for so long. And then by the end, he actually gives a subtle nod to Soros.
In such a callous, dismissive manner.
I don't think it's powerful. I think we've been hearing that our entire lives. Okay. The Schindler's List. Let's just be honest. The propaganda is over the top. We have been in America.
What about the Schindler's List? Tell me about the Schindler's List. Well, tell me about the Schindler's List.
I'll tell you about it. We have been browbeaten as a people, as Americans, as Westerners for our entire lives. And do you know what this has done? It has taken away any sense of pride, any sense of love for our own civilization. We have been made the villain in our own story. We have been made because, well, let's just be clear. It doesn't begin and end with Hitler is a monster. This has been the political narrative, which is why we have thrown open the borders. This is a political narrative, which is why we can't be a conservative society as a whole anymore, why we can't be proud of Europeans, why we can't be proud of being Christian, because they've told us if you're too white and too proud and too Christian, it's going to lead to a Holocaust. And so my generation, our entire lives,
wait, honestly, Nick Fuentes,
and that's why people like me. That's why I'm popular, because this is bullshit.
Shit. Honestly,
yeah, it's a crock. We don't want to hear any more about me mom and me dad. That's a crock of shit.
No, listen. What you just said is a crock of shit, and it's true.
It's called the Open Society.
I think that's so crucial, the Open Society reference, because there was a view that Jews were responsible for communism. Hitler in Mein Kampf repeatedly talks about the Jew Karl Marx. And that is one of how he ties, Jews being part of a bad ideology. And I'm against Soros. I'm against his globalism and what he's trying to do. But I'm not going to get any credit for that. And the thing is, Soros hardly supports Israel as well. He's been more for the Palestinians. And it just, it bothers me that there are these people, these lefty Jews like Soros out there that are, I don't want to say they're fomenting it, but I can at least see where, all these kids that have been told you're evil because you're white, or I've felt like there are too many Holocaust movies at some point, but just teaching these kids that they're evil, and that's how that's why they look up to him, saying, tell them to go fuck themselves, and you do whatever the hell you want, hate whoever you want, and that's part of his appeal.
Yeah, it's part of Nick's appeal, because there is this leftist contingent among Jews. But there's also the better Jews who are not leftists, who are for capitalism. So you can't just lump them all together, just like you can't lump all Christians together. There's bad Christians and good Christians. But there is this appeal that Nick has, and I think it comes from this sort of individualism or self-interest that he portrays. And I don't know if that comes from his interest in Ayn Rand or not, but he does talk about pride for your own civilization. Now, what he means by civilization is white culture, Christian culture. So he means something different than what an atheist or an objectivist would mean, or even just a normal conservative. But he does talk about this in a sort of self-interested, individualistic way, which appeals to our Western values. And especially pride. I mean, he doesn't seem to think of pride as a necessary vice. It seems to be a virtue in his case. He thinks you should be proud of being white. But yeah, I think there is some element of that which appeals to individualists who also have pride in themselves and their culture.
Yeah, he's appealing to those same human needs, but saying, oh, you got to tie it to your whiteness and your race or your Christianity or what have you. But in this clip after the interview, Nick was actually very, nice at the end of the interview, but he was really pissed about Piers bringing up his father.
And he knows what he's doing, saying his name on the air. That wasn't right. And the difference between me and everybody else, you want to go after families, okay, now there's no limits. You want to go after families? We could play that game. Your family's greenlit then too, Piers. Your family's greenlit as well. So, fuck you and your family. Fuck you and fuck your kids. You bring my dad into it, you're all greenlit as far as I'm concerned. So, don't play that. That's BS. I don't like that one bit. And that's really dirty. So that caught me off guard. I was anticipating the full ambush, but that was a total low blow. So that legitimately pissed me off. But when I say greenlit, I don't mean violence. I mean, you're greenlit. Your family's, you're fair game too now. I hope you know that. Your 3 kids are fair game. That's fair game now. You want to come after my father and their livelihood? Your whole family's fair game now. Not that it matters. You're rich. So fuck you.
Wow. So I think you're seeing a bit of the real Nick Fuentes there. He thinks that this was a low blow. He actually says he got caught off guard. So he does admit to
during the interview.
So he admits to that getting under his skin. And definitely Piers touched a nerve. And now he's using the fair game tactic. He's saying, I'm going to go after your kids. This is like mafia tactics, right? Like you come at my family, I'm going to wipe out your family.
And it's still in that kind of, oh, I'm not saying anything bad, just that we're going after him. I mean, what's he going to try to have his kids canceled or something? I mean, there is a implied threat.
Also, it's just dropping all sorts of context. Where Piers Morgan was just quoting something that Nick Fuentes himself shared on his podcast. So it's totally legit to talk about something someone brought up in public on their own podcast and say, look, you're basically saying your father was racist, aren't you? And that's a fair question. And so if he's going to talk about his father, why can't Piers Morgan bring it up? So fair game would be if Piers Morgan says some anecdote about his kids or something, and then Nick Fuentes plays that clip and then talks about it. But what is he going to do? Is he going to hunt down private information about Piers' children and then publish stuff where they go to school or something like that? What's he going to do? I don't know.
He leaves it ambiguous on purpose, and that's part of the strategy. But I think that relates to this last clip where Nick tells a young listener that he has to pretend to play by society's rules, at least until they make the rules.
Hey Nick, I'm 15 and almost got expelled from my school for doing a Roman salute in a video on my channel because my school quote-unquote has a 50-50 demographic. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, you shouldn't have done that. I told you to hide your power levels. You're being stupid. You can't be doing that. I mean, yeah, it's unfair. It's ridiculous. What about the double standard? No, I agree with you. It's BS. But also, you can't be doing that stuff, okay? You got to know the game. You got to play by the rules until you're in a position to make the rules. Okay? So you didn't listen to my advice. My advice was not to go around Hitler saluting. I believe my advice was the opposite. Don't do that. So it's a shame, but you got to get smart. You're 15. You're a grown man. Time to get smarter. I'm not going to baby you like your faggot parents. He's just a boy. No, you're 15. You're a grown-ass man. You can't be Roman saluting. Those are the rules, okay? Hide your power level. The Jews will have no mercy on you. They don't care how old you are.
The Jews won't hold back.
No, this is something that he tells his followers a lot, is to hide your power levels. So this is kind of a Groyper philosophy where you got to sneak into the establishment and not be noticed. Like, this is their camouflage. You got to camouflage yourself and sort of go along with the views of the mainstream conservatives until you're in a position like political power. You have some political power or something to change things. Like, you're part of Congress now. Like, he wants his Groyper army to get into government, get into the established institutions, powerful positions in our society by sneaking in, by being infiltrators. And then when they have enough positions of power, then they start influencing things and changing things.
But it speaks to his own, how much we can trust what he says. Oh yeah, I just want like 5% of people of blacks incarcerated. No, that's him just playing by the rules until he makes the rules and can make it most blacks. And that's what I think he's kind of revealing.
Sort of a resistance army tactic where you pretend to be a good German, but in reality, you're part of the underground resistance, and in your spare time, you blow up railways. Things like that. So in this case, he wants his followers to pretend to be good.
You're kind of making them into the good guys.
Okay. So it's similar, but you can kind of draw the parallel here, whether you agree with the Groypers or not. So they're trying to blow up the conservative mainstream.
The revolutionaries. They're trying to destroy the existing system so they can put their system in.
I think one of the things that Nick said in a podcast that I listened to, he says that they're not part of the conservatives. They're something else. He
that's
realized
true.
that a lot. He realized that a long time ago that he's at war with conservatives. But in some instances, or in some way, he wants them to pretend to be good conservatives so that they can infiltrate the established institutions.
I've seen him make other comments like he'd be Antifa if they were anti-immigration.
Well, there is a strong leftist streak in him, and I think it's reflected in his attitude on racism, because he said that everybody's a racist, which is something you hear from leftists who say all whites are inherently racist. So it seems like he's absorbed some of that woke leftist culture, and that's a problem
Just be
because,
racist.
well, he could just be a racist, but saying that everyone's a little bit racist, well, that's like wokeism. It's like saying every white person is inherently racist.
That's true. If everyone's racist, then he's not that bad. I just think that, I just want to talk about how Yaron is trying to tell us that Trump made Fuentes possible. And I disagree with that. I think that to some extent, Trump being here is why Fuentes is faltering and people like MTG are faltering. If there had never been a Trump voice or something for us that was rational, but that didn't have to turn it into like racism or Jew hatred, then I think Nick might have done better in a world without Trump.
Remind me what Yaron's argument is. Why did Trump create Nick Fuentes?
Basically, this first kind of populist leader saying, we just have to take out the left and all the stuff they're doing. And, it's just, he just wants to have whatever bad is happening, it's because of the people he already didn't like. I just think if we just, kept running these McCain-Romney types that just wanted to appease their Democrat overlords more than care about their base, then there would actually be a lot more appeal for someone like a Nick Fuentes. I'm happy to see that although he's growing, there is a lot of pushback, certainly among conservatives.
Well, I remember Trump invited, what was the name of that rapper to the White House?
50 Cent?
No, the really popular one who just put out that Hitler song.
Oh, Kanye, yeah.
Kanye West. So I remember Kanye West brought Nick Fuentes to the White House, and that was a big to-do, a big debate. So to some extent, Trump was accepting Nick Fuentes at the White House, but I don't know if that
didn't know who he was. It was just a plus one.
He says he didn't know who he was, but I think that didn't create Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes created Nick Fuentes. And I think the main reason why Fuentes is more popular now is because he is appealing to a large conservative base who thinks that America is equal to Christianity, or Christianity and America go together. And so he appeals to that base, even despite his racism. And I think a lot of Catholics are probably a little bit racist because they share some of Nick Fuentes' perspective on things. And they want a Christian nation. And so, I don't know. It's hard.
Good Catholics too. I don't want to, collectivize anyone more than they would me.
No, I'm not saying, I'm not a generalist. I'm not saying all Catholics, but Nick Fuentes is a Catholic. And I think to some extent he appeals to other Catholics who think like him.
There may be a Catholic sect or something that.
Well, I don't think females can be Catholic priests, right? So that's still a thing.
That's true.
So anyway, I think there is an element of, bigotry within Catholicism that appeals to a lot of Catholics. And it goes beyond this bigotry towards female priests. But there's a sort of collectivism there and a sort of tribalism within Catholicism that might be the part of the problem. We'll see if the mainstream Catholics accept Nick Fuentes or reject him once he becomes more mainstream and in public view. We'll see what happens. But
Yeah,
I do think
mean, ultimately, if he becomes a conservative leader, there's not going to be room for me in the movement, and that's because of him. That's not me doing some sort of ultimatum.
yeah, there might not be room for anyone with Jewish heritage,
With Jewish last names.
but I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't either.
Yeah, I think there's
But
going
we have to be aware of it and watching him grow.
What I hope will happen, which I think will happen, is that the mainstream conservatives will eventually get around to refining their argument against Nick Fuentes. They're going to figure out what works against him. And I think it's going to center around him not being America first. We're going to get these true America first conservatives who understand that Nick is race first, religion first, Christianity first. He's not America first. So what needs to happen is there needs to be this debate on what it means to be America first. What is Americanism? I think that is the future debate to have, and I hope it occurs. I hope, and we can have a lot to say in that debate, like what it means to be an American.
Yeah, I think there's something to what you're saying. I hope it plays out that way. Any final thoughts?
Just what I was just saying is that I think Nick Fuentes has an Achilles heel, and it is that he's not really truly America first. He wears that label because he thinks that that's a winning strategy. That's how he's going to enter the mainstream conservative movement. Because like I said, people even like Rush Limbaugh said that America and religion go together. And so he's saying America is founded on Christianity. The founders were Christian, blah, blah, blah. We've heard this over and over from conservatives, religious conservatives. So he's riding that wave of Christianity being the core of America. But we need to get away from that and show that that's not really the core of America. In fact, some of the founding fathers were deists. They didn't like Christianity, and it wasn't in the Constitution. You can argue that we're a theistic nation because we base rights on a belief in God, but that would include Jews. That would include Muslims, anyone who believes in God. So we have to show that Nick is not truly America first. That's just a camouflage.
I do see what you're saying about religion. I do think that, I don't know how much of a Christian Nick is anyway, but I go back to that Tucker thing and trying to tear Christians away from Jews, and that's what has to be stopped. And that we have to encourage to say, the Jews and Christians can get along and don't have to be against each other. I think people knew that for a long time, but they're starting to forget. But I think we talked about a lot of really good ideas, and we'll look forward to feedback. I suspect we may even get some groypers in the comments, so we'll deal with that as it comes. This has been the Ayn Rand Fan Club. I'm Scott Schiff, along with William Swig, and we will see you next time.